This conference will now be recorded.
Thank you. Today is Wednesday, May 11th, 2022. And I'd like to call tonight's City Council meeting to order. May we all stand and do the Pledge of
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
May I please have a roll call?
Councilmember Fox.
Here.
Councilmember Kasberg.
Here.
Councilmember Boyle.
Excuse.
Councilmember Strobehn.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Servany.
Present.
Mayor Thornton.
Excused. All right. Brings us to citizen public comment.
Please. Can you move your mic a little closer?
Sorry, everyone. We'll get this adjusted. Brings us to citizens' public comment, and we will, any of the public comments that are coming from those that may be calling in, individuals will need to press *6 to unmute yourselves to speak. Clerk, can you please call up the public comments if there are any on?
There's nobody online, so it's just
No, call.
Yep.
Okay. And that will take us to the public comments that have been submitted, and you may call those.
First one's Jeff.
Welcome.
Thank you very much. My name is Jeff Snow. I'm a resident up in Southview Heights, and I've been living here in the center since about 2005. And tonight I have with me our HOA board president as well, Rose Delgado. And we're coming here tonight to talk about the proposed apartment complex going in the Southview Heights Aspen area. I just found out about this like an hour and a half ago. So anyway, the proposed zoning changes will inevitably drive a wedge between the current Southview Heights residents and their representatives. Southview Heights residents vehemently oppose the proposed changes, the zoning changes. We believe that these changes will cause irrevocable harm to both the property and the financial well-being of our residents. And the retention pond and drainage concerns. We have our drainage pond right at the bottom of where this proposed property will be, and it's already, we currently have to do a lot of maintenance on that already. So putting an apartment complex right next to that, I can't see how it's going to help at all. Current property values will decline. This is going to back up right to our residents' backyards, a parking lot. Ingress and egress from the city would be mired by the increase in traffic congestion, as if, putting the hundreds of houses in already hasn't done that. 2 lanes in and out of town. You can see almost every day longer and longer lines waiting to get in and out of town. Limited access to emergency services was eliminated with the police department leaving and turned over to the county. We asked that we provided full disclosure of the following: the application for zoning change to include name of applicant and purpose, the timing and steps of this process, the schedule of mandatory meetings and public disclosure, and the city's stance on why are they considering the zoning change and why they feel this is beneficial to the center and its residents. If approved, what is the timeline of this apartment complex going in? What type of infrastructure improvements will be made? Associated tax revenue to be gained? Where are those funds earmarked? And finally, what are our appeal options in the process? That's a lot of questions, I'm sorry.
We don't get into answering your questions here at this evening's meeting, but we'll certainly add your comments and if you have it in written form. It will also be submitted to the minutes.
And you said there's nobody on the phone call right now?
We can open it back up again. We can ask.
I know I put my wife on the card as well.
What's your name?
Billy Snow.
Mayor Pro Tem Cerveny, I think if we can get this gentleman's contact information, we can provide the information that's being requested in terms of any land use applications and any other public records that he is requesting.
Okay. We probably just use our HOA website for all of our names are on there.
Yeah, our email.
Our email addresses on there.
Okay.
Okay.
Would I give it to you after the meeting?
Sure, you can
Okay, I can
give it
my
to me.
name and number as well.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you very
Snow.
much.
And I neglected to mention earlier that public comments are limited to 3 minutes, so keep them concise and brief. And we will do our best to address them to the proper staff members and get all of your questions responded to. So thank you. Next.
We have Bob.
Yeah, good evening. Bob Kruger, and we live up on 13th Street East. And I expected to maybe get a few answers, but no answers tonight. Right? But
Staff will
will
get
they
back to
be given to us in writing with our address on the card?
We have your address.
Comment card at the address room. Well, it looks like this is a little bit of or a big gain for a few, but the rest of us are going to pay the price. The quality of life in this town is going downhill. We've only lived here 7 years, and linemen could see that. But where's the benefit for the people that bought in with single-family dwellings, and now we're going to be neighbors to? What's the protection of that zoning? I'd like to see the benefit of, for the rest of us, what the benefit of this change is going to be if it's approved, and when you're going to vote, and if all the hearings are going to be public. So we'll get the answer. Thank you.
I have Al.
Al Phillip, 152 West 15th Street. Well, last meeting, I mentioned that before the pandemic, we used to have coffee in the back. Well, I guess since we don't have any coffee again tonight, I guess we can't afford it or something. And also, I was reminded before the pandemic, which some of you kind of remember that. We used to have printed agendas back in the back, so that you could pick them up and look at them, because the print is really small there, So is there any way we could get a few printed copies in the back for us people who can't see too well? And coffee? Anyway, okay. Okay, my peeve, and this is a peeve I've had for quite a few years. Most of you realize that anything south of the river, in the city of the center, has a Richfield address. Richfield zip code. And it just, I hate listening to the weather or whatever, they show, from the A up there, they show that and they say, yeah, here we are in the center. Well, they're looking towards Mount St. Helens. Well, what's between Mount St. Helens and A? The center, they don't, we're not getting any publicity, and so it's time to change that zip code, and I don't know, one way, does everybody here support changing the zip code? I don't know.
That's federal government, not municipal.
It's got to start somewhere. When I went in the Army, my home record was Woodland, Washington. When I got back, it was La Center, Washington. So when I say I've lived here all my life, I'm really lying. Because Jenny Creek used to have a Woodland address. Now it's got the center address. You know, but something's got to, you know, there is something, it can be done. It takes a lot. And one of the initial steps I would think would be the city to say, hey, we want everything in city limits to have a center zip code. You know, and that would make me stop complaining about it, which has been, you know, 70 years. You know, you've heard it before. Okay, thank you. God bless America.
Thank you, Al. The next town hall we have with our congressman, we can certainly bring that up.
Happy Nelda.
Nelda Perryman, Center, Washington. Mayor Thornton, Pro Tem Mayor Cerveny, Council, and guests. I have a couple of things I need to share before I start my statement. Because of a stroke and the fact that I'm losing my eyesight, reading my comments here is very, very difficult. However, because I believe so strongly about doing the Our Day celebration for our community, I'm going to give it a try. Also, because if I had emailed these comments in tonight, they would not have been read in this meeting tonight. But that's another can of worms. Okay, Our Days. This celebration has been, hold on, sorry. This celebration has been a community event for over 2 decades. Our chairman has been our leader for over 22 years. Okay, the celebration, I'm sorry, I lost my place. It is one of less than a handful of events for our community that they can get together and have a wonderful family-oriented gathering. We are a nonprofit, totally volunteer group of citizens here. It requires hundreds of hours of planning to make this happen. For whatever reason, this year, certain city employees, some of which I doubt have ever even attended an Our Days meeting or celebration, have been throwing up numerous roadblocks to even have this event. Please, Mayor Thornton, Liz, we ask you to tell these employees to back off and to let us do what we have already done so well, so long for our community. Our committee has already spent time and money soliciting sponsors. But at this very late date, we don't even know if it's going to happen. Please, let us continue this year as it has been. If you want to turn this into a city event, go for it. We can discuss that. But this year, let us have it the way we have. So for now, what I'm saying is no more roadblocks. Thank you.
Thank you, Nelda.
Wendy.
Hi, I'm Wendy Mental Center Our Days, and this is going to be a little bit of a repeat. But the Our Days City celebration in our community has taken place for over 2 decades. After a 2-year hiatus coming out of the pandemic, now more than ever, our community needs this event to return, in some sense, normalcy to our lives and give cause for celebration. This event is organized by a small group of volunteers that spends countless hours marketing, fundraising, operating as a 501c3, and we have our own insurance policy. We did that several years ago. We used to work with the Lions, and then we went out and got our own insurance policy to cover everything. This is a great opportunity for the city to get together and celebrate a wonderful family-friendly gathering. Recent discoveries about vendor ordinances and parade ordinances have come to us, and there's just been a lot of confusion. We've been told that they're in place, that they're not in place, that they've been in place, they haven't been followed through. Now all of a sudden this year, they've dropped and said, yep, they're in place. And it's just putting a lot of, we have like 7 of us on our committee. We're hours into this. We've already got numerous vendors. So trying to make all this happen is becoming a real struggle. And we already require them to write an application, to pay a vendor fee, and this, this isn't a profit. We don't make a profit on this at all. This is just a community event that we try to do. And there's cost, we have lots of fees. And so part of what we charge covers that. If we're asked to do background checks and come to the city and do vendor permits and everything else, we're going to lose our vendors. They're not going to come out for a one-day event if they have to do all this busy work. I'm not going to get some, retired man that makes birdhouses in his garage and want to go through all this hoopla for a one-day event. So, and just the extra work that would put on us tracking all that. So the opinion of our days is that a one-day vendor for a special event, which we do, we get a special permit through the city, that's confined to a certain location should not be required to have a background check or a vendor permit through the city. And when you do consider this, perhaps look at what the other cities are doing and consider like a peddler, vendor, or something like that. But we understand change and the need for the future change as our community grows. We just ask that you review the past and future ordinances to make sure that they're relevant and applicable. So one size fits all, one approach does not work for all situations. And consider what other cities nearby are doing. And we just really need some direction. We need to know if we need to pull this off city property and find another solution this year, or I know we're not going to get answers tonight, and I'm not threatening. I'm just trying to figure out where we're going. I just need to know, do we need to pull this and go somewhere else, or do we just need to cancel the event? So.
Thank you, Wendy.
Randy?
Hi, good afternoon, good evening, council members, mayor, staff, and other guests. Speak into the mic. There we go. So I'm not one for public speaking, but I feel passionate enough about this that I had to come in. And first, I do want to throw my hat into the ring about our days. Second, I'd like to second Mr. Snow.
Excuse me. Can you give your name and address?
Oh, I apologize. Randy Shriver's 581 East 13th Street, listener.
Thank you.
Sorry. And Bob here, my neighbor, about the rezoning. I understand that progress is inevitable and these things are going to happen, but this is really a bedroom community. Do we have the infrastructure for 32 units, 64 parking spots, egress, probably a high concern for law enforcement that is lacking. It's a blind spot when you come down the hill from the water towers. What about busing for the schooling? What about the sewer plant here? Can it contain all this extra? We're already growing at this clip. So I would just, as Mr. Snow said so eloquently, I would also like to know a little bit more about the plans when they come out. And that's really all I have to say about that. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Brian?
Brian Logan, 34806 Northeast 49th Place. I want to talk a little bit about the vendor ordinance that's coming up, and I just want to give some points of just some food for thought on a lot of these things when bringing this forward. So in the center, I guess I really didn't understand how hard it was to put an event on, and me and one of my good buddies, Jody Martin, started the center cornhole tournament in town, and we kind of got thrown in the deep end with the whole thing. And it's something to where there's a lot of natural roadblocks that come to organizing event of any size, no matter what you're doing. So it's one of those to where it's not just this one thing, right? It's all the things that get put in your way to put an event on. And we don't have that many in this town. And so I got 3 points that I want to make about this is I would like for this ordinance to be really thought through as far as the distinction of who this ordinance gets put on. I mean, there's a big difference between someone that comes out one day and makes $110 or $500 or $300 and it's a real small amount when you go through and you put an extra fee on top of that, right? That becomes a bigger burden for them, and it's not just a small thing that like a bigger business can absorb, right? And what's the distinction for a lemonade stand? And who makes the decision between who gets a vendor permit and who doesn't? And that's something that I really think should be written into the code. It should not be left up to the perception of someone that is in power at the time. It should be something that's really thought through and put forward. The second point falls right into with our days. I think the special event permit stuff, we're required to get insurance. We fill out all the necessary paperwork with the city. They know who we are. They know what we're doing. We're usually an established situation where we go through and we police our vendors very well, and point to where we have never had an incident with any of our vendors for any reason. And there's a big difference between our days and someone that's setting up in the gravel out on the road end. I mean, there's a huge difference between that. And one of my biggest fears with this is that we're going to go through and we're going to put an extra roadblock in the way of a business that starts off there. I mean, similar to what Sadie and Josie's is. You know, this could have been the straw that broke the camel's back with them. So when you do this, like really think about, you know, what is the purpose of this, and is this something that's really needed in that situation? I mean, I can see both sides of it, but the last part would be enforcement. If someone sets up in the city park and on a Saturday and doesn't have a vendor's permit, who's going to be the person that goes out and enforces this? Who's going to be the officer? Are we going to have our police chief out there enforcing vendor permits? Are we going to have our one police officer in town doing that? Is it going to be a city officer that we're paying to go out on a Saturday and police city ordinances in the park? You know, we're kind of running on a shoestring budget here. We're running a deficit in the city. And so more ordinances that we have to do more enforcement on, it costs money. And the last part is, if we don't have the ability to enforce these, this is a situation to where when you put an ordinance in place that you're not able to enforce, this is where you start eroding government in people's minds, to where this is the type of thing that, yeah, it's there, but we don't enforce it. And it starts bringing some distrust from the people into the city government. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Let's try one more time to see if anyone online wants to speak. Star 6.
Anyone on the phone?
Yeah.
Okay. Is there anyone else on the phone lines that would like to speak? If so, please press star 6 to unmute yourself. Anyone there? Okay, thank you. Any other comments?
That was all.
Hello?
That takes us to the consent agenda.
Hello, I'm on the phone. May I
No
speak?
any items to be removed. May I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? Motion passes. And this evening we have a presentation from our Fire Chief John Noor. Welcome.
Thank you.
So when I was here last month, I received a request to come and speak to council. There's been several council members over the past, change over the past few years, and just tell you a little bit about the fire district and how we serve the community of La Center. Pull out my notes here. So next slide, please. So first of all, to all the citizens of La Center, council members, thank you for the opportunity to serve and be your fire department. We're made up of about 65 full-time employees. The vast majority of those are firefighters that what we call working on the line. They work in stations on shifts and respond to emergencies in the community. We have 2 fire inspectors, 1 full-time and 1 part-time fire inspector, as well as some management chiefs, a training chief, and a logistics chief. And then we also have what we call the community, the CARES program, it's a community paramedic program. When I get into programs, I'll talk about that a little bit more. We're staffed by career personnel. We also have volunteer firefighters. So sometimes you'll hear me talk about combat firefighters. These are not people who go out and fight people in combat, but that was a term that got picked up years ago. And those are the people who go into the buildings and help put out the fires, and they are also EMTs or paramedics, and they help treat patients. So those volunteers sign up for shifts and ride along with our career firefighters, sometimes referred to as full-time firefighters, and help assist in the community. We also have a small cadre of what we call support volunteers, and they provide other duties that aren't very frequent but are very critical to us. The most critical duty is they drive water tenders. So when we have areas that don't have hydrants, we got to bring our water with us, sometimes several thousand gallons. So these are community members who have jobs in the community, but they carry a radio for us, and if they get a call, if they're able to leave their employment, they do. If it's at night, they get up from home and come in from home, and they drive our water tenders, which are they look like a really large tanker truck, but of course they are red. With that, with our use of volunteers and with the support volunteers, it helps us reduce some costs, and we try to stretch our dollars as far as we can in the fire district. We responded to nearly 5,000 emergency incidents throughout the district last year. Next slide, please. So this is our service area. We serve about 45,000 people in 125 square miles. We have the cities of La Center, Richfield, Woodland, and then the rest is unincorporated county. So you see La Center there in the middle, that's Fire Station 23. I actually have the crew of Fire Station 23 with us today. We have 4 career firefighters on station, or on Engine 23 today. I've been your fire chief here for 6 years, and that's the second time we've had a 4-person crew of career firefighters. So it's an exceedingly rare event. We just didn't have anybody on sick leave or vacation today. And the firefighters here, they work 48 hours on duty, 96 hours off duty. But by federal law, anything above 53 hours a week on averaged out over multiple weeks, they have to receive overtime for, so they get an occasional extra day off. And sometimes they get too many extra days off and they have to pay us back. So Captain Clint Frailer, who's the station captain today, he's riding as our 4th person today because he owed us a day. And the firefighters like to say, oh, I'm working for free today. They're not. They're working back for money they already received. But thank you, Captain Frailer, for being with us today. We also have Captain Colby Gratzer. So Captain Frailer, Captain Gratzer are normally here at this station. And then Colby's regular shift is firefighter Daniel Howell and firefighter Michael Grote back there on the bench. And they're all local folks here. Michael Grote is a sputter from Ridgefield. Daniel Howell also grew up in the area. They both had to move away because firefighter jobs are very difficult to get. They had to move away, do several years. Daniel Howell worked for the fire department in New York for a couple of years, came back to us this last year. He's almost done with probation. Michael Grote worked in the city of Astoria as well as in Central Oregon for several years. But it's an attractive place to work. It's a great community to serve. It's a great department to work for. So we're fortunate to have a lot of firefighters who like to return here. So our stations are, as you see, the La Center station. We have our headquarters station because it's the largest station on 65th in Richfield, just off I-5. And that has our ladder truck at it. The other 4 staff stations have fire engines at them. We have a station in Woodland. And then you'll see we have a station in the far northeast corner. That's our Charter Oak station on 299th and 112th. And then we have our Dollars Corner station at 219th and 72nd. You'll see down on the far edge of the district a fire station. That's Station 151. And that's a shared facility that we have shared with Fire District 6 for over 20 years. Fire District 6 is Hazeldale, Salmon Creek, Philida. And there's an area that neither district could reach very well, and it was served by volunteers up until COVID hit. And because there was a lot of unknown about how, if people got COVID while volunteering, how would they be taken care of if they missed their regular employment, things of that nature. Fire District 6 chose to discontinue their volunteer program, so it's left that station unstaffed for 2 years. Starting in June, starting next month, we will staff that station 1/3 of the time so that we can continue to serve our folks in the southwest portion of the area. Not ideal. It would be great to have a full-time staff, but we're working with Fire District 6 to get that agreement going. So in addition to that, you see we have 14 miles of freeway and rail lines. Those can create some technical challenges for us, as well as a lot of riverfront. When I talk about the services we would provide, that might make a little more sense. Fire departments in our area and throughout the state of Washington, in fact, throughout the United States, continue to merge and consolidate because it's in the best interest of the public. As towns grow and they start bumping up against borders, it doesn't make sense for every little town to have a fire chief and an operations chief and a training chief and a fire marshal. And so we here at CCFR are a conglomeration of several departments. Over the last 30 years, the departments that have merged into the district include the City of La Center, which used to have its own fire department, the City of Ridgefield Fire Department, the City of Woodland Fire Department. They were our most recent annexation 3 years ago. Prior to that, for 7 years, they contracted with the district. Also, Fire District 12, which is the Dollars Corner area, or excuse me, Ridgefield area. Fire District 11, Dollars Corner. Fire District 14, Highlands. Some of you have been around a long time, might remember some of these entities. Fire District 2, which is the far northwest, Bratton Road, Hayes Road, that area. All of them have come together to form one fire district because it's more cost efficient for the public. There's currently 8 fire departments in Clark County, countywide, when you count the cities and fire districts. And I'm not afraid to say that we could easily make that 4 fire departments, but there's about 7 other fire chiefs in the county that don't like me saying that, so I won't say it very often. We also have a contract with the Cowlitz Indian Tribe for the Cowlitz Reservation. Because they are a sovereign nation, they can't merge into the district, so they pay for service from us through contract. Next slide, please. So the services we provide, the most obvious, fire and rescue is in our title. So the most obvious thing we do is fire suppression. We do that by staffing the 5 fire stations in the district, each with a minimum of 2 personnel each day. And each station has a fire engine. 4 of the stations have a fire engine. 1 has a ladder truck that can also function as a fire engine. It can carry hose and pump water. So if it's a structure fire, field fire, things of that nature, every station has what we call a brush unit. So there's one right over here at the La Center station. It can respond on a field on fire, natural cover fire, something that's going to threaten some structures, things of that nature. So we do motor vehicle crashes, hazardous materials responses. So if there's a leak, we'll go out and deal with a hazmat call. If it's beyond our capacity, we call Department of Ecology. It brings in a bigger hazmat team to deal with that. We go to EMS calls. We provide basic life support. So all of the fighters and company officers here are at minimum emergency medical technicians. And then we have 14 personnel that are paramedics. And so paramedic is a higher level of certification. They're able to push a lot of drugs to help out in a cardiac arrest call, a respiratory distress, anaphylaxis, some other life-threatening emergencies, give the types of medications you need if somebody's bleeding out, having a traumatic injury, things of that nature. So we do have some limited advanced ALS, that's the paramedics, that's the advanced life support. We are members of a regional technical rescue team along with Vancouver Fire Department and Fire District 6 in Hazeldale. So 6 of our members participate on that team, and they practice specialized rescues. So rope rescues if somebody's off a cliff, swift water rescue if somebody's in one of the forks of the Lewis River, or even certain times of the year the Columbia River flows a little bit swift, but rescue swimmers for that. They can go into confined spaces, tunnel rescues, machinery extrication. So there's 6 disciplines that they practice on that we don't see on a regular basis, but when those incidents happen, they're rare, but you need somebody to go out there and be able to take care of that. Because they're rare and they're expensive to train for, it doesn't make sense for every department to have that. So we coordinate our resources across 3 departments to be able to field the team when those things are necessary. And that team is actually for Homeland Security Region 4. And so that's Skamania County, Cowlitz County, Clark County, and Wahkiakum County. So our tech rescue team will go anywhere within those 4 counties to assist with. We have a marine division. So on Lake River, we have a boathouse, not a houseboat. Nobody come and live in our houseboat. But it's a boathouse, and it has a fireboat in it as well as a rescue boat. It's a shallow draft rescue boat that can go up quite a ways up the legs of the Lewis Rivers. It can go all the way to the dam during certain times of year, Merwin Dam. It makes rescues on the Columbia River. The fireboat also is a larger craft for putting out fires, doing shipboard fires, recreational craft fires, things of that nature. And then we also have a rescue raft here at Fire Station 23. So if anybody is struggling in one of the parts of the Lewis River, either fork of that, the Station 23 crew hooks up the rescue raft to a special utility vehicle we have and takes it to the scene where our rescue swimmers will use it to make access to the victims or the patients. We also have at Fire Station 23, I'll talk about when we get to that side here. We also have our community risk reduction program. So we, by contract, provide fire marshal services to the cities of Richfield, Lecenter, and Woodland. In unincorporated Clark County, that by state law is done by the county fire marshal. But so we have a fire marshal as well as 1.5 FTE inspectors who go out and do business inspections here. We've been doing that for about 3 years, and we continue to get incredible feedback from contractors, from builders, and from business owners about how the level of professionalism in that arena has really raised since we've started to do it. And with all the development going on in Richfield, Lecenter, and in Woodland, it made more sense to have local inspectors that were there on hand ready to be able to help out with the business owners. In that community risk reduction division, we also have what's called the CARES program. That is a program that pairs a social worker with a paramedic, and they're focused on reaching out to citizens that are high 911 system utilizers. So you may have read some stories where one jurisdiction up in the Seattle area said that 40% of their 911 calls come from 1% of their callers. There are certain people who call a lot. And sometimes it's because they're sick and they're trying to get a disease process under control. Sometimes there's some other issues along with that. And that's where our social worker goes out and works with them. And the idea is to reduce the number of 911 calls that take an emergency response unit out of service and not available to respond to other true emergencies there. So that program is funded through a grant through the Southwest Accountable Communities of Health. They use federal dollars for that. And we also have a home risk reduction specialist that's going around and helping people make their homes safer, focusing on elderly, getting grab bars in their homes so they don't fall in. Usually we get the referrals come from us going on a fall victim or come from the community, working with them on that, how to just make their homes safer. Some people love their throw rugs that they've had for years and years, but you get to a point in life where shuffling across the throw rug is not a great idea. You fall and you have a hip injury and it can be catastrophic. So working with people to make their homes safe. And the money from that, it also comes from a federal grant. Yeah, so that's not tax dollars from the fire district that are paying for those positions. Next slide, please. So we operate under a balanced budget. I've been the fire chief here for 6 years. One of my goals when I came here was to establish greater contingency funds, rainy day funds, replace our fire apparatus, work on our stations, bring in on some deferred maintenance that had happened for some years, and the stations weren't being kept up. And it's really been a goal of mine is to really raise the bar here. And the firefighters and the chiefs in this district are pretty incredible. They all have met that expectation. We do an annual military-style inspection that they didn't have before. It's coming up in June. They know, and their rig will look good. Station 23 won last year. Their station was outstanding last year, and hopefully they'll meet that bar again. But it's taking care of the resources that the citizens give us to make sure that they're in top-notch shape to respond to our incidents, take care of business out there. So we've done a lot towards financial stability. We pass our audits each and every year. I'm very pleased with our finance person. She's, I cannot slip anything past her. So, but that keeps us out of trouble with the state auditor. We are governed by an elected board of 5 fire commissioners. They're elected at large throughout the community. So it's currently 2 of them are from the northwest portion of the district. One is from north of Ridgefield. One is from a little bit south of Ridgefield, and the other is from the Cherry. Not sure. Where's Bob Liv? Cherry Grove. Thank you. I had to look at one of their faces to get it right. But anybody can run for commissioner, and those positions come up. They're staggered, but every 2 years there's a fire commissioner position comes open, sometimes 2 of them. Next slide, please. So the city of La Center is served from Fire Station 23 over here at 414 East Cedar Street. We have a fire engine there, and it's parked out back today. I wanted to put it up front, but it's a new engine. You'll see that's an engine that we received from the Cowlitz tribe, and I mentioned it previously. So it's marked with their logo also. We have a reserve fire engine there, so if the main engine goes down, they use the reserve engine, or if one of the other engines in the district goes down, this is one of our reserve engines. There's also a squad or a brush unit for natural cover fires. We have an all-terrain vehicle there, so we have a lot of people that have, they'll take a walk on the trail system down here on the river bottoms and not be able to get back out, twist an ankle or things like that. And so we keep an ATV here at the station that can be driven down for that. We can also quickly trailer it and haul it to any other area. It just so happened that the ATV went twice last year for problems down at Whipple Creek Park. So Fire District 6 called us. I should go back and say, fire departments, we do this thing called mutual aid. You probably heard a little bit on the police side too, but if all of our resources are tapped, or it's too big an incident for us to handle, we call our neighbors, they provide the resource. 6 doesn't have an ATV, so we went down there to help them out with some equestrian issues there. We have what's called a special rescue here at this station. It carries spare air cylinders that we use at fires. It hauls our rubber raft, and it carries some extra specialized rescue equipment. And of course, the rescue raft that I talked about. I'll talk a little bit about call volumes out of Fire Station 23. Next slide, please. So last year, the call volumes district-wide was 4,982 emergency incidents. Engine 23, or in the Station 23 response area, there was 908 incidents last year. And you say, well, Engine 23 went up 1,300 incidents. Why is that? Because we backed each other up. That a structure fire will get you 3 engines, 1 ladder truck, 1 battalion chief. If the ladder truck's out of service or out of position, then you get 4 engines and a battalion chief. If you call for a second alarm, sometimes you say, well, call for a second alarm or a third alarm, things of that nature, you get another set amount of resources for that. So those engines go and they cover each other. Unfortunately, in the district, we run a lot of 2-person companies. Most days, our minimum staffing is 2 persons. And you can't run a medical emergency or a car crash with 2 people. You usually need 3 or 4. Cardiac arrest, you need 6. So it takes multiple units out of service. So the engine here goes and backs up other units. It goes backs up the Ridgefield engine or the Woodland engine. Those engines coming back up here. So sometimes you may walk by and go, why is there 2 fire engines sitting in front of somebody's house? It's because we needed that to get 3 people on scene to be able to handle that emergency. So that's why the engine ran on 1,331 calls. Brush unit ran 34 calls, so they're not as frequent, the brush fires, but you don't want to take a 40,000-pound fire engine into a slightly damp farmer's field, where we're going to call TLC, and the battalion chief has TLC on speed dial. But, so it's a lot better to take a brush unit out in the field or into the wildland area to help out with that. There's a note up there for Rescue 23. That is an ambulance, a spare ambulance that we have. We do not provide the transport services, but we have 2 ambulances in the district that we could step up and provide ambulance services when necessary. RAF 23 only went out on 2 emergencies, but again, if you're hung up in a stringer or in a tree on the river, you want somebody with a raft that can get out there and do it. So that's what the raft's there for. Fireboat 24 had 10 incidents on the river. And UTV had 1, and I'm not sure why it's registered 1 because I thought we went to Whipple Creek twice, but I'll look at our stats first. And then engine 24 was the backup engine. And you say, well, why would it only go on 4 calls? That's because that engine got staffed by callback personnel. We had a couple big incidents. We had a large fire. All of our on-duty firefighters there, we called people back from home to staff a rig. So I know twice last year at least we staffed. We call that engine there, engine 24. It's our reserve engine. So those are the total unit responses there at that time. that was my presentation. If you go to the next slide, that's a picture of our rescue swimmers in the Columbia River in February of a couple years ago. And what you don't see is a U.S. Coast Guard helicopter hovering right above them, and you're thinking, oh, cool, going to pull them out of the river. No, it's to churn up the cold water and make it more difficult for them to swim in the water there. But it's good training they do. They recertify every 2 years. They did recertification classes this year in the Lewis River, and I suspect the water was cold there this year also. You did hear me refer to a couple times about the strain on the system. There'll be more public information coming out, but the elected commissioners voted in March to place an EMS levy on the ballot. So we are funded. So as a city, you don't pay us. We are a special district, and we cover all of that area. Sometimes cities will contract with a contract, and the cities collect the money, and it's a pass-through to the fire district. All 3 cities here are annexed into the district, so the city does not pay any budget to us for the service. We're a special district, like a parks district or a school district. We're the fire district. And state law caps us at $1.50 per thousand to provide fire services. What a lot of fire districts will do is they provide EMS services out of that money also. But with the expenses of that and the increasing number of EMS-related calls, many districts ask for an additional EMS levy. The maximum in the state of Washington is 50 cents per thousand, but most of the fire districts in this county pay an EMS levy, or the residents of that area pay an EMS levy. So Fire District 6 in Hazeldale has an EMS levy. The citizens of Camas and Washougal and East County, north of Camas, Washougal, they pay an EMS levy that helps provide EMS services in that area. The residents that live in Yakima, Amboy, North County, they pay an EMS levy. Their EMS levy funds North Country Ambulance, so sometimes you'll see a North Country Ambulance out there. So they choose to have their EMS levy fund that entity. So we'll be asking for an EMS levy here. It will allow us to hire 25 personnel district-wide. It'll make it so we have a paramedic on every rig every day, and it will have us with 3 persons per rig every day, so we won't run down to 2 anymore. And that will lessen the number of calls that we have to put 2 or more units on. We can cover those calls with 1 unit, a lot of those EMS calls with 1 unit. Car crashes that are not on the freeway, we send 2 units on the freeway for safety. But car crashes on country roads or side streets often be handled with 1 3-person unit instead of 2 2-person units. A secondary reason for that is our ambulance service here is provided by AMR Ambulance. It's a private for-profit ambulance company, and they have the contract to provide that service to the city of Vancouver. We are in what's called EMS District 2. It is us, Fire District 3, which is Battleground and Hawkinson, and in Fire District 6, Santa Creek, Philida, Hazeldale. We comprise EMS District 2, and we're in a piggyback contract with that. As part of that contract, AMR is allowed 20 minutes to respond to emergencies north of 179th Street. And in my time here, I've continuously argued that that's not enough, or that's not fast enough. So south of 179th, they have, and a little carve out for the city of Battleground, they have to respond to 90% of calls in 12 minutes or less. Which I would say, somewhat tongue-in-cheek, hold your breath for an additional 8 minutes if you can. It's hard. There are times where people don't need an immediate transport, and we can wait there.
Excuse me a moment. What did you do with your coat off?
Conditions that require treatment on scene by paramedics and immediate transport to hospitals for definitive care. And so I've been talking to the commissioners about it for years, and we're tired of those delayed responses. And AMR oftentimes go into what we call level 0. That means there's 0 ambulances for Vancouver or those other areas that I've talked about. And that leaves our units on scene waiting for an ambulance. We don't transport in our fire engines. Keeps us out of service longer, which means we can't go to other calls that end up pending, and some of them a higher priority call. So what the EMS levy would do, it would allow us to staff 1 ambulance 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, that we would utilize to transport district residents in times when AMR is not meeting the contract requirements. And if they continuously fail, they get fined for it. Okay? But the fines don't really turn the problem around. And you'll occasionally hear about businesses that sometimes say, well, I'll pay the fine, it's cheaper than meeting the standard once in a while. I'm not saying that's what they're doing there, but what I'm saying is they don't meet the standard. They pay a fine, but in the meantime, we still have people that are waiting on an ambulance out here. So you will be seeing more information about an EMS levy and how that can benefit the district. That is my presentation. I should have said one person I didn't mention back there is our operations chief, Ben Peeler, and he is the chief officer assigned to the center. So he's who you will see for a lot of your meetings, and I rotate that every few years. You had Dan Yeager for years before that. And so that's my presentation. Questions about fire district, how we work, or what we do?
You said one ambulance. Is that going to be housed at Richfield, at the headquarters?
It would likely be at Richfield or La Center. Those are the two centralized locations, but headquarters all. And so the reason for that is because there's easy access onto the freeway. From there, we can go north and go south. But we also have logistical issues as well with housing and the ability to put it in there. It's also where our fire inspectors are and our training division. So we're looking at how we can move some things around with that. It would either be there or here because there's good access from here to get back to the freeway, to get south, to get to Richfield. As long as there's a what we call a first responder unit or a fire station nearby that can get there and stop the clock. And if the ambulance is 2 or 3 minutes behind, it's okay. It's when they're 15 or 18 or 25 minutes behind that becomes an issue. Yes.
Thank you. Okay, well, I'll throw another one out there. You guys don't have any more. You said you guys are going to take over the Fairgrounds Fire Station, right, in June? Or?
We're going to staff 1 out of 3 shifts. So firefighters, they work 3 shifts or 3 platoons. So when we do 24/48, it's either A shift, B shift, or C shift. We're going to do 1/3 of the time. And they are looking at their budget to see if they can jump in and do that also. But right now, they say they don't have the budget to be able to do that.
Does that mean you guys will be taking over the fair itself?
No, sir, absolutely not. And Fire District 6 has made it very clear to us that they have the fair and everything that goes on with it. Yes.
Thanks, Chief.
Any questions or anything? I don't know if I'm allowed to ask the audience or whatever. Yeah. Questions from citizens?
How much is the levy going to be?
50 cents per thousand for 6 years. And then it's subject to the state 1% cap. So really it doesn't stay at 50 cents for 6 years. So if property values go up, it'll drop to 45 or 42, 40, and then it expires in 6 years.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all for coming.
I told the crew that if they sat through my portion, they could leave after that. Because I don't want them to know what a chief has to go through. Everybody, you guys are free to go. But Colby loves the community. He might stick around longer.
Well, thank you, everyone, for coming. The next item on the agenda following that is a proclamation for Building Safety Month, which I will read all of the various whereases. Building Safety Month, May 2022. Whereas our growth and strength depend on the safety and economic value of our homes, buildings, and infrastructure every day and in times of natural disasters such as hurricanes, snowstorms, tornadoes, wildland fires, floods, and earthquakes. And whereas our confidence in the resilience of these buildings that make up our community is achieved through the devotion of vigilant guardians, building safety and fire prevention officials, architects, engineers, builders, and others in the construction industry who work to ensure the safe construction of buildings. And whereas these guardians are dedicated members of the Washington Association of Building Officials and International Code Council, which brings together expert local, state, and federal officials to create and implement the highest quality codes to protect us in the buildings where we live, learn, work, and play. And whereas our nation benefits from using the international codes, which are voluntary consensus codes and standards that include safeguards to protect the public, and whereas prevent, prepare, protect, building codes save. The theme for Building Safety Month 2022 encourages all Americans to raise awareness about the importance of safe and resilient construction, fire prevention, disaster mitigation, energy conservation, water safety, training the next generation, and new technologies in the construction industry. And whereas each year in observance of Building Safety Month, Americans are asked to consider the commitment to improve building safety, resilience, and economic investment at home and in the community, and to acknowledge the essential service provided to all of us by local and state departments. Now, therefore, I, Elizabeth Cerveny, Mayor Pro Tem of the Center, do hereby proclaim May 2022 as Building Safety Month and encourage all citizens to join in this observance. And we get a motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Motion and a second to approve the proclamation for Building Safety Month. All those in favor? Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carried. Thank you, everyone. Takes us into council staff reports and announcements. Under Mayor's report, I would just like to remind everyone, City Hall will be closed Monday, May 30th, 2022, in observance of Memorial Day. And there will be no Mayor's Town Hall meeting Wednesday, June 1st. We do have a presentation by our attorney, Bronson Potter, this evening, so I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I have this PowerPoint presentation, and I was going to do it from my laptop. Of course, I decided to not connect to the city Wi-Fi for some reason. So I'm going to have to say next or ding a bunch of times during this presentation. So apologize for that, but ding. Okay, so I want to talk to you about the Open Public Meetings Act and some updates to it. The Governor Inslee issued Proclamation 2028 about 3 years ago, just a little over, and that proclamation prohibited in-person public meetings because of the COVID pandemic. And it limited the action that council could do even in remote meetings to just routine matters. So we were very severely restricted in holding public meetings and what we could do during the public meetings that we could have, effective March 24, 2020. Since then, there have been, I lost count, but I know there was at least 15 amendments to that proclamation, sort of tweaking it between 2 years ago and now. On April 29th, 2022, so about 2 weeks ago, Governor Inslee terminated Proclamation 2028. So that returned us to our statutory Open Public Meeting Act rules. So 2028 has been terminated, but the declaration of emergency continues. So in this last legislative session, the Washington legislature passed in gross substitute House Bill 1329, which I'll just call House Bill 1329, which amended the Open Public Meetings Act. And in very broad terms, what this piece of legislation did is it recognized some things that we learned during the pandemic. One of those things is that you can actually do meetings remotely. It works. It may not be ideal, but it works. And also, public participation in meetings was increased through the use of technology, through the ability of people to call in or appear on meetings through internet access. So the legislature modified the Open Public Meetings Act, recognizing these things, and the 1329 has some provisions which are not mandatory, encouragement, and there's other provisions that are mandatory. So I'm going to go through these. I've only got about 9 slides, so this is going to be pretty brief, but I want to go through some of the more significant sections of the legislation. So section 1 is a couple of the encouragements. It encourages the adoption of resolutions or ordinances addressing how and where you're going to meet in the event of an emergency. So that's an encouragement to all counties and cities and agencies. It also encourages agencies to use technology to facilitate public comment. Section 2 is another encouragement. It encourages for us, the City Council, to accept and incorporate public comments into the decision-making process. Section 3, it encourages the provision of increased ability for the public to observe and participate in meetings remotely. And section 4, this is our last encouragement, is an encouragement to make audio and video recordings of a meeting, to record those and to make them accessible for at least 6 months. The center's been doing that for a long time. Next. So section 5, this is a requirement, and it became effective immediately. Those prior encouragements that I was referring to are effective June 9th. So one of the things that they did in section 5 is they actually said in the Open Public Meetings Act, the council can meet remotely. Before this, in state law, there wasn't any provision for totally remote meetings. The proclamation from the governor provided for remote meetings, but not state law. So now state law, the Open Public Meetings Act, does authorize completely remote meetings with some requirements. Before, it was always been the case that individual council members could call in or appear remotely, but we had to have a council meeting at a physical location that the public could come to and hear what was transpiring during the meeting. So now, totally remote meetings are authorized. If there's a declaration or emergency by either the state or a local government, and the agency determines that the public cannot attend with reasonable safety because of the emergency, the agency or council in our case can do 2 things. 1, you can have the meeting completely remotely, or 2, you can have the meeting at a physical location, but limit the size of the audience if that's necessary for safety due to the emergency.
Who decides that?
The council.
The council decides that.
So for remote meetings or meetings when attendance is limited due to an emergency, the public has to be able to listen to the meeting. Okay, and so there the operative word is listen. This provision does not require speaking, but it does require the ability to observe the meeting.
Bronson, does it give a size when it says limited? That it has to be.
It doesn't give like a number of people limit, but it's whenever, so you've got a seating capacity, right? And if you're going to reduce the size of the number of people that come to the meeting below that seating capacity because of the emergency, that's what these provisions kick in. So for a remote meeting or a meeting when you're going to reduce the size of the audience, and if the public, for some reason, cannot listen, you have a technological glitch, then no action can be taken. And I bolded the word action here because, council, what is action? How broadly is it defined? Very broadly, that's right, Councilmember Kasberg. Any act, it includes discussion, consideration. It's not just voting. It's pretty much anything you do. So if we have a glitch, we either recess the meeting until the glitch is fixed, or we continue the meeting. And then your notice of the meeting, if you're going to do this remote meeting or reduced audience meeting, you give notice and instructions on how the public can listen to it. I want you to know that, we do a lot of hybrid meetings where we're meeting in person, where also people can watch this over the internet. So I call that a hybrid meeting. If you're doing a hybrid meeting, but you're not limiting the size of the audience, and it's not totally remote, this requirement to have the ability to listen or not take an action if there's a glitch doesn't apply to the hybrid meetings, because you haven't limited the ability of the public to come to the meeting and observe it. Okay, I'm skipping to section 13 because 6 through 12 was a lot of technical stuff about how you give notices and more things that are on the staff, not you, but I want to talk about section 13, which is a section about public comment. And before this bill, the Open Public Meetings Act did not address public comment at all. Now it does. So it says that you shall provide an opportunity for public comment at every regular meeting where final action is taken, unless there's an emergency. So let's talk about that for just a second. Regular meeting, that's your second and fourth Wednesdays. If we have a special meeting, outside of those regular meetings, this provision doesn't apply. And it doesn't apply to if you're just doing a work session, because you don't take final action in a work session. But going down to my little sub-bullets here, the opportunity for the public to provide that comment can be provided either having them do it orally or in writing. If it's in writing, the written communication has to be distributed to the council members. The agency can set a deadline for when a written comment needs to be submitted by. And the comment doesn't have to be limited to just items on the agenda. And so that kind of brings up this policy question. That's a question for the council as to what do you want the public to be able to comment on. And it could be anything from as broad as anything to, it is limited to council agenda items. And I think your practice in the past, at least in my experience, has been that you don't limit public comment. You just let people have their 3 minutes and they can say what they want. So another mandatory provision is that if a person has a disability that prevents them from attending a meeting physically, they are to be provided with an opportunity to make oral comment remotely when feasible, if oral comment is being accepted from the public. So, of course, they don't define when feasible, but given our abilities, I mean, we have the ability to provide oral comment pretty easily. So I think it's, practically speaking, it's always feasible to allow remote public comment. So I think that covers what I wanted to tell you about the updates to the Open Public Meetings Act, and open it up for questions or discussion.
Well, I have a question. I know that we have a lot of constituents that are concerned about not reading online submitted comments. How does that fall? I didn't really hear.
Yeah, so that is not specifically addressed in this bill. So it does say that you need to provide opportunities for public comment, and it says that they can be written or oral. It doesn't say whether or not you have to read those written comments, so that then leaves it up to you. These are council meetings.
Okay.
They're your meetings.
Yeah, I think it's important that if people, if that's the, their best way. I mean, we've all expanded our communication, since the last 2 years. So why would we stop now and put a blockade on people submitting their comments and reading them? It's not like we have 75 and we're here till midnight waiting to read them all. I mean, we have very little. So we need to keep that voice open. If anything, if we start getting so many, we need to make some changes. But right now, we need to get more input and more participation from our community, so not shutting them out. So that's my feedback.
And that was why we had this open for discussion, so the council could.
I was just sad to even hear that it was an option that you guys were thinking about.
Well, I think you have to stop and think what triggers the question is we can make decisions based on what we normally receive in terms of the public comments that we usually hear from the residents. I think what we also are starting to see are some of the public comments that come in that are outside the city limits and that are outside of our purview, basically. And the ones that we received today, how would we have read that into the minutes? It was attached to basically a YouTube video article that went on for how many minutes? It was.
Well, I think the answer to that is pretty simple. You read the one line that person submitted, and then we do what the law requires, which is forward the emails to the council to view. Because you're right, there's a lot of things that are coming in that are outside of there's not a lot, but there are some things that are coming in that are outside of the control of the city of the center. But since I've been here and since I've been listening to these things, reading the council minutes or the public comments, it doesn't take a long time. I would prefer to see us continue to read those. And if there is those one-off ones like the one that we received tonight, all you have to do is read that one line. If you're limited to 3 minutes of talking in person, I think reading an email in the same amount of time is reasonable as well.
Yeah. So briefly summarize them is okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments?
I don't know about submitting videos. I think just having written whatever they write, if they have a summary of the video, I think that's appropriate, but not playing video.
Well, I mean, I think it still can be incorporated into the whole body of what we're seeing and making that available for those that are reading through the online minutes and the document itself.
Right.
But for us to get into taking up time to try to go through those types of scenarios when it isn't something that we can take in the.
If it's outside the city limits, I think we have standards there in general. If they were showed up in person.
We really haven't had that many comments. I think there was one time that we did 2.5 hours. That was in the first meeting of September 2020. And that was the longest since I've been on council. Normally it's 5 to 10 minutes tops.
Right,
tops.
exactly.
So I mean, for the majority of time, that's how it's been. And the disturbing fact is that the decision was made and posted that they weren't going to be read, and without consulting the council first. Mm-hmm. So for me, I'm in agreement with all of you as well. That I think they should still continue to be read.
All right.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you. All right, that moves us into council comments, and our first one is Councilmember Fox.
Hi, good evening, welcome. Glad to see a lot of faces. Definitely heard a lot of what you guys had to say tonight. I too want to just pose to the city that I personally do have a lot of concerns and questions about the apartment. We have a lot of barriers in place, and hearing solutions and what that looks like. And yeah, a lot of concerns there. But also about vendors, I recognize that we definitely need to create a balance, with one-time events that we have, because we are such a small, tiny little bedroom community. We don't have a lot of events. I recognize that. I've lived here my whole life. I know we have just a very few. So having a one-time event and having vendors that are involved with that, understand that's very different than having people out at the bridge or having an ice cream truck guy who's consistently out, for months and months on end, or having a door-to-door vacuum salesman, somebody like that, kind of creating some discrepancy, because exactly, these small town folks who live here and just want to show up and put up, yeah, I get that that is a hassle and that is a burden for sure. And we don't want them to not participate and then lose out on such amazing, and I agree with Wendy, everybody who talked about our days. We need to bring our family back together. You know, we need to, it's just like when, you know, COVID was over and we got our kids to play with their friends again, it makes your heart just soar. And I feel like the center needs to come back. Everybody just needs to get back to 2018, 2019 time and just recenter. So I do agree that we need to create a balance there because it's important here. So I look forward to us figuring all that out and working with our town to make all this work well. Because there shouldn't be this many barriers in such a small town where most of us do know pretty much everybody. So that's my 2 cents. Thanks.
Mayor Pro Tem, can I jump in here just for a second? Sure. So I'm going to take this opportunity to talk just a little bit about appearance of fairness and why sometimes council doesn't directly answer questions that are being asked by you on issues that are come before council. Again, so it sounds like this rezone, I'm not familiar with it personally, I haven't reviewed it, but it sounds to me like it's a site-specific rezone, which, if that's the case, that puts it in the quasi-judicial category of actions that council takes, where your decision has to be based on the record that comes before you when you hear the rezone. And so when that's the case, council members are prohibited from having ex-parte contact with people about the proposal because they have to limit their consideration to the record at the hearing, and they can't prejudge the issue. And so I'm not saying anybody has prejudged this. Certainly having concerns isn't prejudgment, but those are the kinds of things that we have to be careful about. Where on the other hand, something like the vendor code, that's completely legislative and free reign. You can talk to anybody about it you want, wherever you want, but just sort of, we have to operate under certain rules, and that is why we sometimes are careful about just responding to public comment.
Thank you, Hudson.
Thank you.
Councilmember Kasberg.
Good evening. Thanks for coming. I wanted to say a couple of things tonight. The last council meeting, I made some comments that were misinterpreted by a few people. And what I was referring to wasn't a complaint or anything negative against a vendor or even asking the city to take any action on it. What I was talking about was just drumming up some interest in our local Little League field and the vendor that was there. So again, what I said was misinterpreted, and usually I think I'm pretty clear when I say things, but that may not always be the case. So I will try harder to make sure that I do that. But on that subject of communication, it does seem like we've heard a lot about miscommunication between the city and the citizens, whether it be with the ordinance that we can talk freely about, some of the things that we can't talk about, but like we had several people tonight come in and talk about our days. So I guess my point in bringing this up is I asked for the citizens' patience when dealing with the city. Don't jump to conclusions, but on the city side, I think we really need to take our time when we're answering questions, because not everybody understands what the legal jargon is all the time, or what the proper terminology is when you're relating what somebody wants to do versus what's written in code or even state law. The sewer deal with the school district is a really good example of that. It had gone on for years and had been an issue where the two sides weren't communicating very well at all. And recently, in fact, I got some feedback directly that the last meeting that was had with Mr. Cast in the school district went really well. So thank you for that. I appreciate it. And I know the school district appreciates it. So I guess in closing, I'll just say let's make sure of what it is that we're saying before we say things on the city side, and then the citizens just please ask clarifying questions, follow it up with an email so things are documented, because I think there's some misinterpretations that are going on between the two groups here. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Councilmember Strobehn.
I think those two really summed it up well tonight for me. I don't have any comments. Believe it or not. I did great job.
All right. Takes us into staff reports, and I have as being the first one, community development staff report. And Brian, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Good evening, Council and citizens. So I will be presenting the community development staff report this evening. I'm just going to hit the highlighted red new items to keep this brief. Before you, here is a map of all the items that are on the extended list that will be in the minutes. The first item that I wanted to address is project number 12 and 34 on the list, which is Riverside Estates. Item 12 is the park that is going in, and the playground has been installed. The basketball court's in, the trail and walkway around the playground have been installed since our last update. So the contractor is making great progress on that. We will be coming to the council at the next meeting to do a development agreement amendment to extend the deadline on the current draft that says that the park needs to be done and accepted by the city by June 1st. And due to some utility work that's going on, it's questionable whether it'll be June 1st or a few weeks later. And in the interest of recognizing all the work and effort that's gone into this project, staff's recommendation will be to extend that another 6 months just to make sure that everything is tied up. So we'll be back next meeting to discuss that further.
Real quick, Frank,
yes.
One second. On that 12, that's for Riverside Estates. Is that the one where we approved it to be one large park instead of multiple parks in there?
That's correct.
So this is the park.
This is the large park that we're talking about. That's correct. And then item 34, also Riverside Phase 1, is a post-decision review. Pretty simple. We're just editing some notes on the cover page. It goes back to the whole litigation and ongoing issue that you're all familiar with on that. And thanks to our city attorney for his ongoing assistance on that one. Items 27 and 28 was a sign permit for the high school and the elementary school. We received a sign permit to do from the school district to do some electronic reader board signs, and those, if you note, there was requesting a variance. They have actually withdrawn that application, working with Dave Holmes, who represents the school districts, to what they submitted didn't meet the code or variance criteria, so we're trying to work with them to amend that application so that's something that we can get to where they want to be and also meet the requirements of the code there. So working closely with Dave on that one. Item number 29, another sign permit out of the Tappany Rockery. Again, they had submitted a sign permit and then also a variance. We worked with them to not require the variance, so we're going to be, they withdrew that. We're going to be refunding their variance fee and able to fit in what they wanted to do within just the code itself. So worked with them to try and tweak their application a little bit so that it meets the requirements of the code and also gets them what they need. Let's see here. Item number 30 is a cell tower site that's at the south area of town. It's basically they're adding a generator and a fence around it. It's a pretty simple one. Just working with them on landscaping and screening so that it's not visible from the roadway. Let's see here. Item 32, the Center Road and the CPU flow station. That is the project. It's actually going out to bid tomorrow. That's the one that council authorized us to bid at the last meeting or the one before that. I can't recall which it was. And then a couple final items here. Item 35 is a new pre-application that we got in sort of across the street from the high school. So that is going to be held on the 4th of next month. No, excuse me, it was received on the 4th of this month. I think it's scheduled for a week or two from now. And it's not on the list, but since it's come up here a couple times, I think the pre-application that was discussed at public comment is the 1319 Aspen pre-app. That was for a zone change for some apartments at 1319 Aspen. It's a vacant parcel just west of Aspen. Basically the pre-app was to lay out the process for the applicant on what would have to happen for that sort of zone change. It's a type 4 process, which is the highest level and most involved process that our city code allows. That zone change would have to go to the planning commission for their review and recommendation. Then it would come to the city council for your review and approval, if that is your choice. And then following that, the apartments or whatever they choose to build there would have to go through the whole type 3 application process as well. So there's plenty of time for public comment and input to be received on that. We're just at the very beginning of the process. And since that pre-app that was held on the 30th of last month, we haven't heard back from the applicant. So we're not even sure if they're moving forward on that project. With that, the other thing I would mention for the public or anyone that wants to see our recent land use applications on the city's website under quick links, there is a link to see all of the recent land use applications, including 1319 Aspen rezone pre-application. So feel free to take a look at that. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Is there any news on Minute?
Yes, there is. I will skip ahead to my other report. We have approved the Fuel Island building permit for Minute Mart, the hotel, and the Minute Mart, new Minute Mart itself are currently undergoing a structural review.
It's good to hear.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Would you like to segue into your public works staff report?
That sounds great. Maybe I'll just combine these two in the future. We'll have to see. So again, for the public works staff report, I'll just hit sort of new and recent items. And the first of those is in parks and grounds. With the weather that we've been having, grass is growing, but it's also very wet, so it's been a challenge to get out there and do all the mowing that we would typically like to be doing this time of year. But we're making do as best we can. We had some storm damage along Breeze Creek Trail with the snow and the windstorms that we had a few months ago. All that debris is now cleaned up. Fencing is being repaired that was damaged with those events. And stormwater side, our street sweeper was recently out of commission for a few weeks due to some breakdowns. It's now up and running and back out and working. So glad to have that back operational after it was being down for a little bit. On the administration side of the public works crew, we've been doing some pesticide training. We do have one staff member that is out on paternity leave right now, and partly due to that, we are hiring a seasonal position that is available on the website, encouraging anyone that has some interest in helping out the city, doing landscaping and weed eating and that sort of thing to apply. On wastewater treatment side, I believe in my last staff presentation, I mentioned that we were having some issues on one of our membrane bioreactors. The trouble turned out to be a magnetic coil on a vent valve, so something pretty simple causing a lot of head scratching. But once we got that identified, it's now operating back under normal parameters, and the issue that we were having wasn't in danger of causing any sort of non-compliance with our wastewater permit. We are also undergoing preparations to replace the membrane bioreactors in both 1 and 3. We only run the 1 and 3 currently based on our capacity of the plant. So in preparation for that, we had a cable placed on a crane. Those new membrane bioreactors are supposed to be in at the end of the month, and it's going to be a pretty interesting process. Encourage anyone that's interested in checking that out to come see how they go in. It's interesting for engineering dorks like me. On the building department side, I think the main thing that I wanted to hit was the minute management, which we already touched on. We have had 43 building permits come in so far this year, including 3 single-family residents now. 2 of those are model home permits, although in the final plat that was just signed this evening, I expect that we'll start to see some more applications come in now that we have some more lots available. And then finally, on the engineering side, we have begun work with the architect that was selected, that council approved for the community center remodel. We're also working on getting the parking lot repairs going out there with that commerce grant that the city received. And we are just about ready to put out a request for qualifications to have the design completed on the shared use path project out on Pacific Highway. That is another one that we got some grant funds to cover the design on. With that, happy to answer any questions about those or any other projects.
Is there any plan to move that pile of art dust that's taken up a couple of spots at the?
Yeah, it's been slowly shrinking as we utilize that large delivery that was received, but yeah, we need to.
Is it more that can fit in the bins?
It is. We got a pretty large delivery early in the year, and I think part of it's due to the weather.
We can bring some to my house.
I'm wondering if that's part of the reason that the pile hasn't been shrinking. Is people needing bark, but yeah, that's definitely something that we'll work on clearing out of there to open up those parking spaces.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
Takes us to ordinance, resolutions, and public hearings. And Police Chief Richardson will be presenting the resolution regarding formalizing the next steps regarding police services.
That's a mouthful. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem and City Council and the community members and staff. If you recall, back in on April 20th, we had a workshop with the staff regarding, with the council regarding the police department. We had John Walters from Public Safety Testing come and speak about recruitment issues. We had an attorney from our insurance carrier come in and talk about liability issues. And we had our finance department talk about our budget and what the long-term outlook was for our general fund up through 2027. And we also had a discussion about how we had some recent conversations with both Ridgefield and Woodland regarding contracting out police services. And at the end of the meeting, the council gave direction to have me start talking to Ridgefield and Woodland about whether or not they're actually interested in doing a contract for police services and with their ability to do a contract and what that would look like. And what you have before you is this resolution, and the resolution basically is from the council, just giving me formal authority and direction from the council in the form of a resolution to engage in discussions and negotiations with the city of Ridgefield and the city of Woodland to determine whether those cities have the interest and ability to provide police services to the city to replace its police department, and under what terms, excuse me. And there was also some other discussion about how the council wanted to make sure that we took care of the 2 remaining employees and did everything we could to make sure that they got some type of employment. And that's also included in the resolution. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, well, why do we need a resolution? I mean, we didn't do that for Clark County Sheriffs. We didn't do any type of resolution.
We didn't get that far.
Well, it's the same thing. He's going out for negotiations that are not just negotiations. You can see if there's interest. It's the same.
This is taking this resolution.
My suggestion, and the reason I suggested that was to have it in black and white and clearly directing the chief to take action. And if somebody from any agency wanted to know the council's position on the matter, there's the council's action. It's not just word of mouth or one person's interpretation versus another's. So I think in this situation, with a matter as significant as a direction on how to deliver police services, it was in the city's interest to have that resolution.
Thank you.
And talking to the other cities, mayors, this documentation actually gives it more credence coming from the full council, and the directive for them to proceed with taking action with their council. So it has more power behind just word of mouth.
And just for clarification, after reading through the decree, it stated that we would still, it'd be brought back to council so that we can approve or make suggestions or as such.
Yeah, that's correct. We're required to come back to council and do periodic updates. I have a meeting with John Brooks, the chief, tomorrow. I have a meeting with the city manager at Ridgefield on Tuesday. And so we will come back and give you periodic updates. And then as we actually get into contract negotiations, ultimately the contract that comes back to you is something that you'll have to approve.
If there's interest, right?
Yes, if there's interest, and it's going to be a long process because remember, we've got to deal with two different city attorneys, two different councils, and they have to get through the process to finalize something to bring back to you. So that's why we want to get started.
When we're talking about a long process, can you give me an idea?
I won't know that until after I talk to the city manager next week, their city manager.
Did you have something to say?
Well, so to my laptop, I'm doing this a little bit from memory. I think the resolution requires regular updates to the council. And it's not going to be brought to you as, here's this contract, approve it or don't. I mean, there'll be issues that come up, I'm sure the chief and they will be looking to you for direction on issues as we're going along.
We have to have numbers like, okay, how many officers are we going to fund? How much coverage are we going to have? Is it 24-hour coverage? Is it 20-hour coverage? What those costs are. We'll come back with a menu, right? So you have, okay, we're willing to pay, we can afford X amount of dollars. We have to look at not only the cost of the positions and the number of positions and the cost, but what's the proportionality? So let's say we want to help fund a detective position. And so I've gone through, I looked at 5 years worth of offenses, what we call Class A offenses, which are the ones I come every month and talk to you about. And let's say that percentage is 80-20. Well, we might want to say, okay, we'll fund 20% of the detective's position based on our workload. And you guys do the 80. And those are discussions we have to have. And then we're talking about records and then the administrative side of things. They have a proportionality of lieutenant and the police chief, and what kind of meetings do we expect them to attend as administrators here in the city, obviously council meetings, staff meetings, those kinds of things. And then there's the other side of the equation, vehicles. And then finally, we have to have a discussion about all the assets that we currently own and how we can transfer those over to the city of Ridgefield. That's what we elected to do. And they agreed to that because they would need cars because they have to take home cars for their employees. We would then have to sit there and say, okay, what are the values of those assets and how do we transfer them over? So there's a lot of things to think about in a contract. And then we have to talk about liability and all these other things. So it's not going to happen overnight, but I think that Ridgefield and the center, good working relationships, much smaller entities to deal with in the county. The county has a much bigger bureaucracy that we can move, I think, quicker than we could with the county. It's nothing to false the county. The county just, they're a big entity. Remember, we started having conversations with the county in April of 2021, and we didn't even get to council until about November of 2021. So it took quite a while. Part of that was just the fact it's very hard to get on the agenda of the county council. You have to go through their county manager and get on their agenda. So there's a lot of process, and I don't think we'll have that long of a process working with Ridgefield or Woodland.
Any questions? All right. Recommendations? It's the resolution, so entertain a motion.
Sorry, I have a really hard time reading that, so if you want me to read that.
I'll try to do it.
I just zoom in or something, thank you.
I would like to propose that the city council approve resolution 2022-461, directing Chief Richardson to engage with discussions and negotiations with the city of Ridgefield and the city of Woodland regarding contracting of police services.
Okay. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Clerk, can you take roll, please?
Councilmember Fox,
Present.
Councilmember Kasberg,
Yes.
Councilmember Boyle,
We need to
Oh,
get
sorry, I
some-
thought he said attendance, that's why I was so confused. I was like, okay, sorry.
Councilmember Fox,
Yes.
Councilmember Kasberg,
It's free to go.
Yes.
Councilmember Boyle, Councilmember Strobehn,
I fought really hard for the police department, so it's very, very hard. Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Severny.
Yes. Thank you. Motion passes. All right, the next item on our agenda is executive session, unless we have any unfinished business or new business. And it's projected, pending litigation, projected for 15 minutes. Will we be taking any action once we return?
Yes, we will.
All right. We shall return for those that wish to wait. Sorry, we still don't have coffee. For those that are remaining, thank you so much for joining us.
This conference will now be recorded.
Right now, I think they'll keep in mind
I just sent Janice an email and told her that.
everything's go.
So that it actually be until the next year. Okay. Good.
I have, their union is just as bad as
I'm glad that you too.
All right, we are back in session.
Is the recording on? Okay. I would like to move that council authorize Mayor Pro Tem Severny to sign the settlement agreement in the matter of Eric Hood versus City of La Center as discussed in the executive session.
Second?
I have a motion and a second approving Mayor Pro Tem Severny to work with Attorney Fox and Potter on a settlement agreement with Eric Hood versus City of La Center. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Again? Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carried. Can I get a motion to close the meeting?
So moved.
Second? Thank you. Motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, everyone. Staff?